today. I love going to different cultural events. Like I celebrate Holi, I go to powwows. I just like anybody's festival, I'm there. Lunar New Year, but I always end up in tears because I'm like, okay, well, what are my traditions? Who am I? And I can adopt traditions of other cultures, and I like, incorporate different things into my own practices, but nothing really feels like home because I'm from here. Well, I will say that you got to think about selection bias here because when you compare the Africans who actually made it to the United States, that's a very select few. So if you think about everybody who's back home, okay, that's the big population. But the sample of folks who actually make it to the States, that's like one of 10,000. You know what I'm saying? Or one of 20,000 or one in 100,000. So the odds of you being just like a whatever kind of dude and going through all those hoops and jumping through all those circumstances, the people that make it over here are the ones who are more driven, are the ones who are determined.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of Lost Lagosians, a podcast covering topics about Lagosians, Nigerians, and Africans in diaspora, as well as trending topics surrounding Africans living in and out of Africa. I'm your host, Brother Mike. Thank you guys for tuning into this show. We really appreciate all the feedback and comments we've been getting. Love you guys, and hopefully you're gonna also enjoy today's show. So it's June 12th, 2022. Happy Democracy Day to my fellow Lagosians and Nigerians at large. For those of you who do not know, June 12th was declared a national holiday in honor of the late MKO Abiola, who contested in the annulled general election of June 12, 1993. There was a lot of uprising and violence, and many lives were lost, and that's what led into the election of General Olusegun Obasanjo in 1999, Nigeria's fourth republic. So now in Nigeria, June 12 happens to be a national federal public holiday. So in line with June 12, we wanted to wish you all in Nigeria listening, and all Nigerians, a happy Democracy Day. Something else happened on June 12 across the ocean in the United States. There's a guy by the name Richard Lovin, last name is Lovin, and he married his sweetheart, Mildred Lovin, who happens to be a black woman. The wedding took place on June 12, 1958. It was a pretty abnormal wedding because Richard was white and his wife Mildred was black. Right after the wedding ended, they got woken up by policemen with flashing lights in the bedroom, and they'd come to arrest the couple. The police was arresting them because it was illegal at the time for interracial marriages to take place in the state of Virginia. Apparently, the Lovins, Mildred and Richard, had committed what Virginia called unlawful cohabitation. Their marriage was deemed illegal because Mildred was black and Richard was white. So their case actually went up to the Supreme Court on June 12, 1967, whereby the state of Virginia, it's a case called Lovin versus Virginia, the state of Virginia basically lost and the Lovins won because the Supreme Court ruled that it's actually unconstitutional to prohibit interracial marriages. Now, each year on this date, also known as the Lovin Day, June 12, we celebrate the historic ruling in Lovin versus Virginia, which declared it unconstitutional, the law in Virginia or anywhere in the country, to prohibit mixed-race marriages. And practically that legalized interracial marriage in every state in the United States. By the way, the couples were given a choice. They had to flee or go to jail right after they were arrested. They were actually sentenced in prison for a year, and they again had the choice of facing banishment from the states or going to prison. They chose to leave Virginia at that time, but after several years, they had the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, to take their case, and they won. Now, today, we have a very, very interesting podcast for you guys. We have a couple, a Nigerian, actually Lagosian, married to an African-American woman. Yes, it's not the white versus black, but again, it's two different tribes, two different cultures, two different backgrounds. And speaking of marriages, in the United States in 2021, 34% of adults aged 15 and over had never been married. That's 1 in 3 adults have not been married in 2021, according to the US Census. That's up from 23% in 1950. So in 1950, about 1 in 4 adults 15 and older had not been married. Now it's like 1 in 3. The percentage of married couples household that are interracial or interethnic actually grew in the United States from 7.4 to 10.2. Again, this data is all according to the United States Census data. There's a senator in Indiana that in March of 2022, 3 months ago, actually told reporters that the Supreme Court was wrong back then to strike down state laws that banned black and whites from wedding. There's an article that I'll link to by Jordan Wiseman of Slate.com that was published right around March 22 talking about this. Yeah, just to let you know that sometimes we make progress and history kind of wants us to go back. And sometimes people come up with ideas like this Republican senator from Indiana. Last name is Braun, although he did walk that back later. So it's kind of hard where you have interracial marriages and interethnic marriages, and there's a lot of challenges. So if you're someone who is married to someone who's not of your tribe, of your ethnicity or nationality, you might even be both Nigerians, but someone who has like a different, maybe even religious affinity, but love is what unites people together, as in the case of Loving versus the state of Virginia. So really hoping that this episode will kind of shed some light on that. It's lighthearted, it's fun. If you know someone who might benefit from it, or if you are someone who's dating a Nigerian and you're not of Nigerian descent, I think this might be a good episode to sit back and learn 1 or 2 things from. It's a 2-part episode. This is part 1. Hope you enjoy it and take notes. There are a lot of things we go over, and hopefully someone will find this useful. Without further ado, let's get into the show. Thank you guys for being here. The one and only Chopé in the building.
I'm chilling, just here and having a good time enjoying the weather of Seattle.
Yeah, and we have with us the one and only Nat Quinn. Hey Quinn, thanks for being here. What's going on?
Thank you for having me.
Today we want to talk about something particular to something in mind of a lot of you guys, and that's how do you deal with intercultural, interethnic, interracial, intertribal, international. I mean, all kind of all kind of relationships. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Really excited. I think we'll learn. We'll have fun, and it's going to be exciting. So for me, I haven't gone to college here in the States. I've been in, I've had interracial friendships, interracial dating relationships, actually, with different people of different ethnicity and different backgrounds. I've also had sometimes white friends and friends from other parts of the world and stuff like that. So I think it's kind of, I have something to lean on. Not as rich as the experience you guys have here, but let's go ahead and do a quick introduction. Everybody knows who Chopé is, but Nat Quinn, can you tell us a little about yourself, please?
Yeah, I live now in the Pacific Northwest, but I'm from the South.
So there are 2 things I think we want to touch on here. Number one, being African American, married to a Nigerian, and then also secondly, for those who are married to Lagosians or Nigerians in general, what can be learned? So what lessons, what tips and advice can we give? And secondly, for those that are Nigerians, but they're married to other tribes. So those are the 2 angles we're looking at it. So number one, foreigners really married to Nigerians. And secondly, those that are married to Nigerians that are Nigerians too, because this is like a real problem. You might have someone who's of a Yoruba tribe, and I married someone who's like Igbo, Hausa, or different tribes. Because Nigeria has about 250 tribes just within that small country. So with that said, sorry I said small. I mean relative to like the US or somewhere else. Yeah. With that said, let's talk about the African American experience first. Like, what are the highlights? I mean, what's there to be said in terms of the relationship between like African Americans and Africans? And Chopé, you can kind of chip in here if you disagree, agree.
Yeah, I'll let the wifey go first.
Yeah, I do not like that term wifey. He knows that. I'm like, wifey is what people say when they're not married. They say wifey. Yeah, that's what people say when they're coupled but not married, wifey. But anyway, my first experience between, my first experience with the dynamic between Africans and African Americans was when I was in college. I was at a big university, and I remember they would have these meetings where the Black Student Union and
At
African
what school, do
student.
you mind?
This was University of Oklahoma.
Okay. The Sooners? Is that the Sooners?
Yeah, Sooners. So there was a big meeting between the BSU Black Student Union and the ASU African Student Union. And I don't know what the original beef was, what the original quarrels were, but it was like they wanted to have these ongoing discussions and dialogues to try to bring the two communities together. And that was the first time that I was even aware of challenges or differences, because my experience was different. Like, my lived experience was very different. I later on ended up meeting a lot of different folks who, most of them identified as Pan-African, and then they were well connected. So at a different school at OSU, they were all probably about like 10 years older than me. I was really young, early 20s, and most of them were early 30s, had already finished school, but they were well connected at OSU with the different international student groups. But there I saw different dynamics where Black students and African students, integrated seamlessly. They worked together. They started businesses together. They would throw parties together. It was the folks who people in Oklahoma would know. There's a big community of folks who did events and parties and all kind of different things. And it was spread pretty far across the state, from Stillwater to Tulsa to Oklahoma City. And so I saw two different dynamics. In one place, there was like, okay, we need to come together, we need to resolve conflict. But then in another place, I saw people interacting really beautifully and almost seamlessly, no matter where they were from across the diaspora.
So Pan-Africanism is just the idea that people of African descent should have common interests and they should be unified. There's a documentary right now, actually, on Netflix by a guy named Tony Ibrahim Adekeye. I think that's how you say his name. Mm-hmm. And the topic of the documentary is called Bigger Than Africa. So it's on Netflix right now, and we're recording here in June 2022. And the at least it's showing in the US. And it talks about how a lot of African Americans who left, they came to America or to the US through slavery. A lot of them are trying to trace their roots back. And it's not just Africans only. It also focuses on the Yoruba tribe, like how Yorubas are like everywhere. Then the Brazil, they're out in the Dominican Republic, they're in different parts of the world. And in fact, there's a town in the South where they built after the Yoruba tribe. They have their dresses, their attire, they have the obas and the guards. So it's a common theme to see people, usually African Americans, who try to kind of bring that cultural West African heritage. Why would you say you're different as an African American from the Africans?
Well, I'll just speak to my personal experience. I've always felt like, okay, who was I before I was a slave? And that was a question that nobody could ever really answer for me. It started with kind of questioning religion, like at church. I would say, okay, I knew that my ancestors contacted this information through the transatlantic slave trade, but I was always curious, okay, what did my people, like, number one, where did I even come from? Number two, what did my people think, feel, and believe before the white people came and brought them over here? And so it was almost feeling like a child without a home, or feeling like there was a place that I belonged to that I couldn't name, that I didn't have access to. And I started traveling overseas when I was young and building connections and community. Like, I've always had a global mindset. And I went to India. I turned 16 in India and I turned 17 in Uganda. I was into world missions really heavily as a child. And then once I got to college, I had roommates from everywhere, like a roommate from India, and then friends who were Mexican, just like really immersed. I was able to really immerse myself in the cultures of my friends, but I felt a disconnect for me because I was like, okay, well, where do I belong? But then towards the end of my college experience, that's when I met those folks from OSU who were older. And then I was mentored by much older generation of folks. Two men in particular who were members of the Black Panther Party back in San Francisco. And I learned from them directly before both of them passed away. I just knew them both a really short amount of time, but that was like a really life-changing experience. But I like honestly, and even now today, I love going to different cultural events. Like I celebrate Holi, I go to powwows. I just like anybody's festival, I'm there. Lunar New Year, but I always end up in tears because I'm like, okay, well, what are my traditions? Who am I? And I can adopt traditions of other cultures, and I like, incorporate different things into my own practices.
Yeah.
But nothing really feels like home because I'm from here,
Yeah, you're from the States. So the village I was thinking about, just not to go back too much, was I think it's called Oyotunji. It's in South Carolina. It's a village where they have all this Yoruba culture and stuff. So there's a lot of eagerness among the African American community to kind of recreate. And back to your point about finding the identity, have you looked into like the DNA test at all?
Yeah, I've thought about it, but I mean, it's just gonna say West Africa, and I know there's some that can be more specific and things like that. But for me, there's there's a couple of relatives in my family who really are tracing our roots, and they've got it to. I know they shared a birth certificate from a maybe like 6-time great grandfather who was in Panama and worked in the Panama Canal, but I think he was actually born in the Bahamas. So there's some interesting history that's emerging from my family doing their own research, but I don't really have a desire in doing a test because even then, like I can't connect that with actual people, and there's nothing that's been passed down that would really be meaningful for me.
Yeah, you'd be surprised though, because I've heard that about 90% of the African Americans, anyway, that came to the South, a lot of them are from West Africa, places like Nigeria, Republic of Benin, Ghana, Cameroon. So, I mean, some people swear by that 23andMe, and it might be worth looking at because your husband and you might actually be related. If you ever looked into it. Let me say something real quick. I want to say that you are like 0.001 percentile of the population in terms of African Americans or Americans in general, in terms of your background and how traveled you are, talking about, spending your 16th birthday in India, 17 in Uganda. A lot of Americans don't even travel more than 25 to 30 miles from where they were born. So you are kind of that outlier. And I just want to say that. I want to acknowledge that. And I want you to know that you are really, really exceptional for being diverse and being open to kind of, let's date outside your culture, being African American. So with that out of the way, what exactly would you say about Africans that is unique, African American men versus like African men?
Yeah, for me, I think, like, if I'm being honest with myself, I think I've only, like, my first 2 boyfriends in high school were white, and not necessarily because I chose them, but they both like expressed interest in me, and that's kind of who I went with. But other than that, there was like one boy in middle school who I wasn't interested in. He was black. No, he was black, and he pursued me. But other than that, the men that I've expressed interest in have always been either of African or Caribbean descent. I don't think there's an African American man that I pursued in terms of like wanting to build a dating relationship. Yeah. Maybe just like, like here and there kind of thing, but nothing serious.
Why would you say that is?
Primarily it was common interest, like in how we met, number one, because the things that I do especially then, but I would say now too, the things that I do, the places that I go are not typically things or places or activities where African American men would be. Like if I'm going to be in a reggae club or in a salsa club or in, you know what I mean? Like in a an event that likely going to be very few African American men.
So what she's saying is that interest is basically like in a Caribbean club or African gathering, like the ceremony that she likes, the place that she the amuser that attracted the attractiveness that drew her to that kind of a party or club or whatever thing is like African or Caribbean setting. That's what she kind of said that she prefer. And mostly when you talk about those kind of setting where you will find mostly Africans, Caribbeans, Jamaicans, what do you call it?
Trinidad and Tobago, TNT.
Yeah.
Okay, so what she's saying is it's a matter of preference. So this is where I disagree with you. I disagree with you because I think African American men versus African men are more, especially those that immigrated here, they're more determined, they're more driven, they've got this hunger about being successful. A lot of them are actually, they know what they want and they're very specific. They're not all over the place versus African American men. Number one. Number two, a lot of African men also, they don't have that slave mentality. And I hope I'm not offending anybody by saying this. What I mean by that is they believe that the white man is not necessarily your enemy and the white man is not necessarily someone who's trying to put you down. So we tend to aspire, we tend to have drive, we tend to be more successful because we always want to go after things and we don't think there's a limitation. Would you agree with that though, Naquin?
Well, I will say that you got to think about selection bias here because when you compare the Africans who actually made it to the United States, that's a very select few. So if you think about everybody who's back home, okay, that's the big population. But the sample of folks who actually make it to the States, that's like one of 10,000, you know what I'm saying? Or one of 20,000 or one in 100,000. So the odds of you being just like a whatever kind of dude and going through all those hoops and jumping through all those circumstances, the people that make it over here are the ones who are more driven, are the ones who are determined. And even if they come from like extreme poverty or whatever, they have those support systems because it's not a journey that you can just make by yourself, but you have to have a certain skill set anyway for the community to invest in you. Because this is something that I learned is that a whole community will invest in one individual so that folks can say, okay, that's my source. That's my connection to the States. And then that Sankofa principle, it's like, okay, now you owe us, you know what I mean? Like, or not that you owe us, but we're expecting you to return back and retrieve. Yeah, you know what I mean?
So you said a lot in those few sentences. At least I picked up a lot. Number one, selection bias. Go ahead, Shope.
Well, when you say Africans doesn't feel the let me say, let's just make it more simple, like the racism. We do feel it, but we don't let that impact us as much because we coming from a place of where we have nothing. And for us to come down here, we just trying to just progress as fast as we can. So some Africans will tolerate some nonsense. We will call some BS that if you are a Black American, you know what it is and what it is in the society that you were brought up from. You won't tolerate that. Why African would tolerate it? Because they know they come out here for to progress. They come out here for opportunities yeah. and to strive and to better back home. Most Africans are not willing to settle here in America. They just are here to just like most Mexicans that you think that comes over here, they're not really trying to settle down here. They're just trying to just get as much of money that they need and build their immersion back home. And that's right. As an African. So African right here would just like ignore the BS of what is going on in the society because they know they got better potential and opportunity back home. All they just need is do what they came here to do, get their education, get a better job, and go back home and be okay. because that's what it is. So for why, if you are an African American, especially a male, you don't have nowhere else to turn to. This is your home, basically. America is your home because this is all you know. So you cannot tolerate it. When you see it, you speak on it, you be vocal about it, and you just like, I can't take this. I don't want to, settle for. I don't
They
know.
have their own casinos. They have their casinos.
And the amount of tax they have to do. But when you look at the African American, they have nothing.
So, but from a relationship point of view, though, I think I don't know, Naku, do you have anything to add as to why would, for mate selection in general, if I had to select a mate and one of them was African American, at least probably as the opposite sex, one was African American, was African, why should someone look at an African and say yes to an African and no to African American? And you're not selling out here. We're just having a conversation.
Yeah, no, I understand. For me, it wasn't that black and white. It was just that what in the circles that I was in, that's who the available partners were. That's who the people that I had common interests and the folks that I ended up connecting with on a long-term basis that happened to be of African or Caribbean descent. But it wasn't that concrete. But I do think there's a growing number of Black women who are interested in men from the continent, just in general. But I don't think it's like they're discarding Black men and only choosing African men. I don't know. I don't think it's that black and white like how you make it seem.
I have a niece. She came here with us from Nigeria, and she's getting married to African American as well. So it's not that she's getting married to African American male. So it's not. How should I put it? It's not that we see ourselves differently. You just watch. You prefer your preferences. If I'm like, for me, I'm in love with a Black American woman.
Why is that? I want to know why that is.
Why is that?
Because there's so many Nigerian women that are single.
But he doesn't hang out with Nigerians. Brother Mike, he doesn't hang out with Nigerians. He's more, to me, Shorpay is more Black American than I am, and I'm more African than he is, based off of if you really look at our interests. I'm not saying like our family, our roots, our culture,
I got
but just our interests. He's more into hip hop and all this different, and me, the stuff that I choose is more global. So it's like, even though we are who we are, our interests put us in the opposite categories a lot.
Yeah. Makes sense. I'm saying that because I know the both of you. So what you're saying is that
your interest
and your preferences
make you
pick okay, and your location. Because like I said, when I went to school I went to pretty much predominantly white schools, and there were a lot of Nigerians there, and a lot of them were dating white girls and stuff like that. And I had white friends too. So I think your location, your preferences and stuff, that's what you guys are saying.
Yes.
Well,
it's circumstantial rather, but not necessarily selection or.
Well, let me be a little bit more concrete, because the way that Shorpay and I met, okay, there's apps and different stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I had a profile picture, and this was my first time ever being on an app.
Yeah.
And I wasn't seeking like I'm looking for a husband, like that wasn't my intention.
God had a plan. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I do remember I uploaded a profile picture where I was in Kenya with some Maasai warriors behind me. And once I put that image up, then all the Africans in that part of Oklahoma just started, like anybody in my zip code who was an African man immediately recognized, you've been to Kenya. Oh, you're a Black woman who's. So that just put me in connection. And then he saw that and that he was drawn to that too.
And so you got that vibe. Okay, she's into Africa, yes.
And everybody was like, "Oh, you been to Kenya? Like, what are you doing going to Kenya? You live in Oklahoma."
Right, like she understands me. So you find a African American woman that really understands you, that understand your culture and your tribe, even though with difference, but it's good to find someone that understands you. Sometimes you can find an African American woman and you get with them and they won't understand your culture. It becomes a burden between your union. The tension will be there. So when you find a woman that's already knew about your culture and where you're from and they understand it, so it's easy for you guys to communicate and understand because you know where you're coming from.
Right. And there's a lot of white people too. Like I said, I went to college in predominantly all my education was from white schools, except in Illinois with when Chopin and I went to college. Other than that, I mean, there are a lot of occasionally you see these white girls that went on a mission trip here, mission trip there. And most times, a lot of them, they draw a lot of black guys because, oh my God, you're white, you've been to this place, you've been to that. So it's very, 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 very interesting and unique. It's kind of, I don't want to say bonus points, but so now let's kind of get past how, people meet. What are the benefits? Would you guys say, what benefits would you say is? I want to talk about benefits first, and I also talk about challenges. Let's talk about benefits. What are the benefits of having that intercultural relationship? And this goes to the other piece I was talking about people within the same country, but being married, like a Yoruba marrying Igbo or Igbo marrying a different tribe and stuff. What would you guys say is the benefits? You guys are quiet. Who's going to go first?
I knew he was gonna go first, so I'm letting him go.
I'll let her go first. I'll let her go first. I want to.
Yeah, ladies first, please.
Yeah, man, let her hit.
No, I knew he was gonna go first. So I said, let me just wait. But for me, I don't know if I could say the benefits are because of his culture, but it does help that now I have an identity by association. Like I'm proud to have the last name now. I'm proud to be able to speak to family members, directly, and then have a place to go if I wanted to go, and so the potential, we haven't been like yet, but that's something that's on the agenda. But like the potential for that connection, even if it is by marriage, like that's really, I mean, I feel like that's as close as I'll be able to get in this lifetime in terms of like real human connection. Because I could go visit, and like anytime I've been to Kenya, Uganda, South Africa,
which is very different from Nigeria, by the way.
Yeah. But just to say, but every time I'm a visitor and like every time when I go to the continent, I'm definitely a visitor. But this time when we go, I would be, going as family, and that would be very different. So I would say that would be a benefit.
So you have ties now.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Our Nigerian family has when they be Iyawo, how they treat us Iyawo.
Yeah.
Like when you get married in Nigeria, how we treat they treat your family treat your wife. What I'm saying? They treat her like the queen she is, and they'll let her, walk the red carpet, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And so for her to have that kind of for her to experience that when she go to Nigeria, it'd be fantastic for her.
Yeah, that although it depends on the family, I would say relationships.
Families. Some families,
yeah, it's been a relationship. But now, question back to you, Chopin. Like, what would you say the benefit of having been in a union with Nat Queen?
Being in a union with Nat Queen is a blessing because my previous relationship, there's a problem with understanding. You know what I'm saying? And they got people in my previous relationship. They're trying to tend to. Every now and then jokes about being an African. Every now and then say, okay, they use being an African because of a situation that's going bad. Because you're an African, you don't understand me. Now they use that as the excuse most of the time to just get by with the things that's going on.
Can you give an example? I think I know where you're going, but an example would help. Yeah, this is what I'm thinking about. Like, somebody got, I don't know, let's say somebody got arrested and he got put in jail. That's bad. And
Right.
then you trying to empathize or trying to understand. They're like, oh, you don't get it. Like, oh, you don't get it. Like maybe in Africa, it doesn't work this way, something like that. But then, go ahead.
When you are an African man, let me just bring it down a little bit lower than where you're going with it. When you're an African man and you're married or to an American woman that doesn't understand your culture or doesn't understand who you are,
Mhm.
she just like you because of who you are, but don't really understand your culture. So when you're trying to be a man as an African man, like, okay, this is why I'm in charge. As an African man, I intend to make sure everything is okay. We are safe and we're secured.
Yeah.
Most African people, I say people, I don't want to say women. I would say people in general, even though the men and everything, they always think that African, because of doing that, we become controlling, which is not controlling. Okay. If I want to make sure that we are safe, the door's locked, this is done, this, and they says, okay, you've been controlling, you've been this, you've been that. If I says, okay, what you're about to do is not going to be good for us, don't do it. That doesn't make me being controlling. It doesn't make me say, I know it's a bad situation because I lived it in Africa and I say I hands up and I don't want to be in that same foot. So I'm telling you that this is not right. Let's focus on a different dynamic. Some African women feel harder. This is my country. I'm from here. I know this. I know more than you do. Okay, you know more than you do. So because I wasn't born here, but wait,
I mean, African American women.
you were born here, so now you know more than me. So now you're trying to tell me as a man that, or vice versa, that you know better than me. So it become a challenge. So for you to find a woman like someone like Nat Queen that really understand your culture and understand who you are in your being, that is just
if an African man marries an American woman,
Mhm.
the perception is that sometimes the African man can be considered as being controlling. But marrying someone like Nat Queen, who's understanding of African culture, that is not always, she doesn't always think that way. She gets it, she understands who you are, and okay, I see. Do you agree with that, Nat Queen? I mean, is that because you are exposed, you've traveled, you've been to all these places, you've been to Africa, you kind of get that a little bit?
I would say it's probably gonna be hard for Shorpay to make generalizations without it being specific differences based off of personality types, and just because people are different, period.
Right.
So I understand where he's coming from, what he's trying to do.
I was-
But maybe in general, there was a lot of stuff that just doesn't have to be said, because like I have more of an understanding, or this is not my first time dating outside of my culture. So maybe there's like a level of comfort for me that brings a level of comfort for him.
But something else I wanted to talk about is, apart from that piece of it, how about like with finances? I mean, if someone is married to someone from their culture, there's this feeling that, okay, because we're from the same culture, we get each other. There are certain unspoken rules about how financial situations should be managed. But I know a lot of couples' finances can be a big deal for them. So how would you say your cultural differences as an African American woman and an African man, how would you say that has helped you navigate that?